Hello and welcome to today's video podcast of Business Made Simple with me, Hayley Kosolu. Joining me today is Steve Lena from The Curious Northerner. Hello, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
So do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Steve, as Hayley said, and I work with businesses and teams and individuals on people development, essentially, from mindset, confidence to performance, communication. My background is from professional football and the police force, and I kind of learnt firsthand the fragilities of mindset, firstly from football, where I struggled, and then without hammering the police, learnt a lot about toxic environments and things that really stop teams from working effectively. So my journey came towards firstly wanting a new career for myself and a really kind of inherent kind of care for people. I've always kind of been like that, so to create a company around doing that was really important to me, and that started off as a one-to-one kind of only approach, but now I've developed into doing much more with teams and businesses.
Awesome. Okay, so I know that you do a lot around DISC, DISC profiling. What is DISC for people who don't know anything about it, and how do you think it is beneficial not only to the individual but also for the wider team?
Yeah, absolutely. So DISC is, I'll simplify it, because back in the day I fell into the habit of saying, oh, I do DISC. What is DISC? It's an acronym: D, the I, the S and the C. Some people will know it as the colour profiling. Essentially, at its very core, it's understanding yourselves and others better and having better relationships. That can be used in a multitude of ways, from leadership development, team development, recruitment, retention, because essentially if we don't understand ourselves, we can't understand others. We don't know how we're showing up for work. We don't know what our preferences are. I mean, would you like me to kind of cover the model very briefly, or is that kind of enough for... So the beauty of DISC and some of the other colour profiles is its simplicity. If it's too difficult to understand, you're not going to be able to kind of practically implement it. So it's on an axis, and essentially it's split in between outgoing and reserved, task and people, and we all sit within that. And in the middle of that's where conflict lives, and that's something that I talk to people about and businesses. Conflict lives there, and conflict thrives on misunderstandings. People aren't just difficult for difficult's sake. They are likely different to us. And first of all, rather than seeing them as difficult, and it's actually a slide on the PowerPoint that I do on my DISC kind of days with teams, there's one that just says different v difficult. Labelling someone difficult means you've wrote them off as just being a bit arsey. Viewing them as different provides curiosity. What makes this person different? And think of that from a leadership perspective. How can I get the best out of this person? And you start to view things in a different way. So without going down too many rabbit holes, in its simplest form, it's the art of communication, it's the art of building rapport, but in its kind of infancy, you've got to understand yourself first. So one thing I always say to businesses and teams, rather than pointing at X, Y and Z and Jack and Jill that aren't doing the job, turn the mirror back on you first and understand you. And that's kind of the way I approach it.
Absolutely. I think as well, you know, we sort of grow up having to be the same as everybody else in like the school system. You know, we've got certain criterias we've got to meet. We're told that, you know, we have to be good at a plethora of different school subjects, and then that goes on to whatever you decide you want to study. If you decide you want to go on to study further subjects, and we sort of, I think, are pigeonholed into this. You have to be, you know, a jack of all trades, master of none, good at everything. And actually, as individuals, we all have different traits and different characteristics that make us who we are, and I think it's something you don't really come to understand until you've sort of in that realm of adulthood and thinking, you know, that person really gets under my skin, and looking at them as the problem, when actually it may just be they're a different character to you, and you might not gel with that person simply just because you have a different way of thinking and a way of doing things. And also communication, as you've already mentioned, is a massive thing.
And one thing I want to point out is, just because I come in and do a DISC facilitation day with you and your team, you're not going to walk out going, oh, we're best mates now, me and him. It doesn't work like that. We don't have to like everyone, but we can have a working relationship with someone where the ability to adapt our behaviour is really important. So the blue C style on the DISC model is all about detail, all about standards. They will not take a step forward unless they've got everything they need to make that decision. You liken that to the D or the I style on the top of the model, where they want variety, they want to get on with it. So straight away there, you think about a boss that comes in and said, can you get that done by the end of the day? And what that might do for a D style that thinks, I need a little bit more time to think about this. That's just a really simple example, but it happens day in, day out. So understanding is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I did mine quite a while ago, I came out as sort of a high D, but with an element of C, the appreciation for the systems and the processes. And I had an employee at the time, I'm going back a long time, and she was firmly in the S camp, very, very green, very steady, very sort of, you know, happy in her own little bubble. And I always used to struggle with that individual until we did the DISC profile. It was almost like somebody had switched the light on in a dark room going, this is why this person drives me to distraction. And it's not anything about them as such, it's just the fact that we're two wildly different people. We appreciate different things, and you know, and actually learning how to communicate to that person was a game changer in terms of how we then work together after that.
And ideally, in the middle of the model where I said this is where conflict lives, when I speak with people, because I do it with all my one-to-one clients as a matter of course, just for me to think, how might they want a goal set? Do they just want to crack on and do it, or do they need time to think about it? And that's pretty much what you've just said, that human aspect, which I'm not saying you haven't got a human aspect, but you're very much on the task side of things.
Absolutely.
I know you set up your own business when you were younger. It's like, let's get things done, let's get the process going. And it's just thinking, right, what does that person maybe need off me in terms of that human aspect? And likewise, the other person needs to meet you halfway. And that's where cultures start to build and those environments that we want to be part of.
Absolutely. And sort of, you know, building that team and that awareness, you know, helps then with the confidence and the productivity and all the rest of it. So why, moving on to sort of the confidence element of it, obviously I think DISC profiling is really helpful from a confidence perspective because it helps you to identify, I suppose, who you are and what you need and helps you then better understand other people. What do you think it does in terms of how it affects then the team from a confidence perspective?
In terms of knowledge for you as an individual, or
just, well, both really, knowledge for you as an individual, but then also how the team then can improve their confidence as a consequence.
I mean, if I could, I'd just split this into two things, because first and foremost, confidence is a word. I mean, every single person that's come to me for one-to-one coaching has said, I want to feel more confident. And I'll always say, what in? And they'll say, well, what do you mean? It's like, we can't be confident in everything. So firstly, I want to make sure and make it clear what confidence is. It's the act of doing. We can't think our way to confidence. We can think positive things and think affirmations, but at some point we're going to need to kind of dip our toe in the water. So first and foremost, taking action is the key to confidence. Secondly, if you've got a DISC profile where you're aware of how you best respond and react and what will get the best out of you, you can make sure you're taking action in line with you. Whether you're a high D style and want to do that bungee jump straight away, or whether you're maybe a D blue style and you're kind of just dipping your toe for a bit and finding your feet, it can help you kind of navigate that in the right way for you. And that's why it's so important, because we think about days gone by with businesses where, and there's no criticism in this, it was a one-size-fits-all mentality. This is the way we do things. This is the way we onboard. This is the way we show you the ropes. And just from that conversation we've had, the red style will like to just make a start and overcome things as they go. So you think about building an IKEA cabinet, and I've got relevant examples, but I'm not sure if they might watch this, so I'm not going to name names, who might just make a start and then realise they've missed screw from part one out, have to undo it. The job still gets done, but that's the way it's done. And I also know, I'm going to name this person because I think you might watch it, my dad, who might get all the details out, all the nuts and screws, and sit there and make sure everything's right before you make a start. The job gets done both ways, but it's about preferences.
Absolutely.
And stop laughing at my dad. So yeah, in essence, I think it's helpful to break that into two, because people might think, well, what is confidence? Firstly, you can't be confident in everything, so think what you want to be confident in. If you want to be more confident in communication, how are we going to work on that and how we're going to make steps towards it? And then secondly, of course, understanding yourself better is gold dust, and understanding you better and knowing what you need off me. And then hopefully people just come in that 5%. We're talking about small margins here, and I'm sure with everything we talk about, it's not reinventing the wheel. Small, tiny steps. You just do one press up a day. One press up, that's easy, but you've done 365 by the end of the year. It's thinking about those little building blocks, you know, put one brick down a day is what I say, and probably bore my one-to-one clients. Because at the end of a week or a month, you might have a wall. At the end of the year, you might have a house, and you're kind of just building all the time and building trust in yourself, which is important.
I think it's that, like say, that 1% method is quite a hot topic as well in the media at the minute, and it's something I sort of try and get my clients to look at as well in terms of doing that little thing every day. But I think also going back to the confidence thing, when you're if you are, let's say, an S style personality, and you need to have a conversation with a D style personality. Then if you've got that profile and that information, I mean, we shared all of ours between the staff and it helped us to understand each other better. But if you've got to approach somebody that is sort of that D, that personality, or a C or whoever, it can actually give you better advice into how do I best communicate with that person in a way that they're going to understand.
Get to the point, which is essentially if we're talking as if maybe this said D style, and what I would say is D styles get a lot of stick. They're easy. When I do my days, they're the easiest to acknowledge. They're the ones direct, just get on with it, we're going to do this, do it now, right, on to the next, that type of approach. They're the doers, which is great. So, but it's important to acknowledge, if you go in there with problems, you think of the old saying, I want solutions, not problems. That's the idea. So if we can massage their egos a little bit, and I'm not saying manipulate, but adapt, it's really important. And likewise, hopefully the D styles can do likewise with the S.
Absolutely, yeah, super. So I think we've touched quite a lot on obviously the DISC profiling, but it is one of the sort of the one of the core services that you offer. What do you say to businesses that are potentially struggling to retain staff, and what they can potentially do about that, and how things like DISC profiling and that motivation and that understanding can potentially help with retention? Yeah,
so I'll use a little bit of a case study without naming names or companies. Nothing starts with me pushing DISC, but in my experience, and definitely this last year, the companies I've worked with, there is an underlying lack of effective communication, and that's where DISC comes in. We cannot show up effectively, adapt, amend, build better relationships if we don't know who we are. I know I'm kind of regurgitating what I said before, but that's the facts. So essentially, a lot of the time when we talk about what we do on team building days, what I did with this said company, module 1 was DISC. And then we moved on to managing stress, building high performing teams, and etc. And we moved on from there. But it's got to be built on communication. It's got to be built on communication. And I know we're going to cover some topics probably that will lean onto this, and building trust in people. Without trust, the conversations, and this is something that really came out of probably the last 3 companies I've worked with in any depth, conversations are happening, but they're not in the room. What you had were, you were having team meetings and one person doing the talking and wanting to do the best for the people, but there wasn't any trust built. And he'd say, has anyone got anything to say? And everyone said, no, that's fine. And they're walking out the room and saying, do you want to hear what he just said? And it was that type of culture. That's quite a toxic culture, but it happens a lot. How can we get those conversations in the room where we're having positive conversations with disagreements? And we're kind of moving forward together with a bit of a shared vision. That's where culture kind of comes in.
Yeah, and I think as well, sort of, those shared values, and all the sort of the other stuff that goes in with it. It's not just about sort of the DISC, but in terms of going back to the point around retention, a lot of people say, people only leave because they want more money, or people only leave for this reason or the other. I mean, I disagree that money is the main motivator for people moving. I think a lot of it is around potentially maybe they don't feel supported, maybe they don't feel understood, maybe they're doing lots of stuff outside the job spec or whatever. So what would you say is sort of like the main tip if a business owner was struggling to retain their staff? I
genuinely agree with everything you've just said. I think people don't generally leave for more money. Some might do, but I would suggest if people were happy in an environment, they would actually turn down more money to stay where they are. And I think and I'm not going to make light of the difficulties a lot of businesses have now, hand to mouth, it can end up being very transactional. That's your job, get it done, you get paid, you go home. Going under that and starting to build trust and making people part of the process, I think is a game changer. Giving people a voice. For example, when I was in the police, and this is standard police behaviour, someone would come up and they'd give me this incident, go and do that. It might be a dead body, it might be a shoplifting, it could just be a domestic argument, it could be anything. Go and get that done, come back, then I'm going to give you something else. I do it, am I invested? Now, this doesn't happen in the police, I'd like to think it does now, but what if the sergeant had come up to me and says, I've got this incident, have a read, let me know what you think. I have a read and I tell them what I think. What's your first thoughts? What do you think priorities are? And you have that discussion. And you walk out that door and you've got a totally different mindset. Because I've been part of this discussion. I've been part of agreeing what we're going to do. I've not just been told. So if we kind of equate that to all businesses, give people a voice. You're the boss, of course, you get to the final say. But brainstorming's amazing. How do we think we could do that? You're the feet on the ground. What could we do that? You can't do everything. You don't want to bend over backwards. You want to make money so you don't go out of business. I understand all that. But these little steps that can give people a voice and make them part of it, and they're going to walk out with that autonomy and that accountability. And that builds trust. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think as well a lot of business owners, if they have a problem with a particular individual or group of individuals, their initial thought is, I'll send them on a course.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of business owners that do this think, oh, this is a problem. We're all gonna go on a course, and it's all gonna sort of solve all these problems. But a lot of these courses, whilst they've got great material and they are usually very good courses, they don't then take that information and then learn how to apply that to the business and how to make it relevant within their service.
That sounds a bit harsh, pointless, but what everything I do, and a lot of other facilitators I know, I want to make it practical. I say at the start of the workshop, if after 4 hours you leave here thinking that was a great day, go back to your office and nothing changes, I've failed. It needs to be practical. We need to implement things. So the really important thing is, and that's quite well intentioned, there's a lot of people I've spoken to and they think they are doing good doing that. And it's better than nothing, of course it is. But we need to look at the big picture, because what that screams to me is everything we've spoke about. It's small, consistent behaviours over time where you will see that results. Sending them on a course for effective communication for 2 hours and walking out and expecting everyone to be coming in jazz hands on a morning. It's like, it's not going to happen. How are you doing it every day? And unfortunately, on one hand, I always speak to team members and say, you are culture, which means you are part of the problem and the solution. How are you showing up every day? But there's no getting away from the fact the umbrella of the hierarchy and leadership is important, and it needs to come from them, what they do, and that's consistency.
Yeah.
Can't just turn up every couple of months and say, how are you? You okay? People don't build trust on that.
No, yeah, it's that daily communication, isn't it? That
exactly.
Difference. So you touched on sort of culture there. What do you see as sort of the most common issues around culture in businesses? Because obviously businesses can have good culture, they can have not so good culture. What do you see as the most common issues around that? Again,
for me, I'll try and simplify it, because you could go off on tangents with this. Communication comes into it again, or lack of, not effective enough communication, and not aligning people with a shared vision. Again, the example I gave about me in the police force, get that done versus how do you think we could do this? That's the way I see things. Don't get me wrong, there might be one person on that team that you just can't pull around, and bad apples, I don't particularly like that word, but they do need dealing with, and if appropriately, need to leave, because that one person can affect everything. But in general, I think people turn up and want to be part of something. And I think as human beings in our kind of just natural state, we like connection. Although we're talking here with a purpose today, it's nice just to have a cup of tea and ask how you are and talk. And you feel better when you leave the room. So how can we implement that? Not have conversations for conversation's sake, but make people part of it. And this isn't having a pizza every other week on a Friday. Oh, I had a pepperoni pizza, it was great. I love working here now. You know, it's kind of like, that's nice, well-intentioned, but let's make people part of something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do see a lot of that is their connection.
The go-to.
Beer and the pizza on the
Well-intentioned, well-intentioned, and no criticism meant for people that get pizza. I like pizza. But what are we doing day to day to improve the business? Because leaving it from transactional, that's your job, get it done, you earn money. If you haven't got any trust on your team and you haven't got that culture of having these conversations on a regular basis, what happens when you stop making money? I'll tell you what happens, it leads to blame. Their fault. No one taking responsibility. Whereas if we're having these regular discussions about what's working well, what we could improve, what would you do differently there, both individually and collectively, when the results kind of dip, which is normal, what we're going to do now. It's a totally different kind of ethos of how we're going to approach things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched a little bit on vision there. So I encourage all businesses to have sort of a very clearly defined vision, mission, values, sort of, because that is in my opinion, the sort of the foundation really that is the beginnings of the culture and how you operate on a day-to-day basis internally in your organisation. How many times do you come across situations where there's no clear defined vision, mission, values, and actually when that is resolved or worked to be resolved, things start to sort of naturally progress and change?
And again, trying to simplify this, because it could be a one-to-one client, it could be a team of 6, it could be a company with 300 people, so I'm aware it's different depending on the circumstances. But yeah, I always use the analogy, you know, you won't get in a taxi and say just drive, mate. You wouldn't. What would you do? You'd tell them exactly where you want to go. So first and foremost, clarity. You've got to have clarity. Absolutely. And that's got to be fed through. So a lot of the problems I find with some team members as well, who maybe underperform, they might overperform, they might do this, that and the other, is a lack of clarity about expectations. So if we look at it like that, it does kind of feed down from the top. Let's be clear on what we want. And again, I'm going to use the word, communicate it effectively. It all comes down to it, and that's what I say. Every time I speak with people and I say, what's your problem? They say, well, I've had conflict, we've had a bit of conflict, we want that resolving, or this has happened, that's happened, and you kind of just scratch away at the surface and you're like, communication, clarity, understanding, personal responsibility, and all these traits start to come out. So my first thought is, well, how can I put a little program together to cover all those points and give people the tools to go away and kind of work on it? So yeah, that's my simple answer. Again, communication, clarity, a clear vision. Yeah. Or if not, jump in a taxi, the next one you see and just say, drive, mate. Until you get to 200 quid, then just get out and you've not gone anywhere. So it's kind of that. Just being clear on what you want.
I like that analogy. Yeah, I can't imagine the taxi driver's face.
He'd love it. I'd be a taxi driver if that were the case. Driving round a roundabout, 20 minutes.
Oh dear me. Okay, so slightly different now. We are seeing a lot in the media specifically around stress and anxiety and sort of well-being in the workplace. What should business owners be more aware of? What could they potentially do to support their staff around these subjects that have become they've always been there, right? It's not a new thing. It's just that it's more widely spoken about and it's sort of more widely acknowledged now that things like stress and anxiety and mental health is a subject to be supported with staff. What would you say to a business owner who is not really sure where to start or sometimes how to tackle that?
It's really tricky, and again, this conversation go on for days because the mental health anxiety kind of thing isn't going away. It's a real problem. I suppose the key thing here, differentiating between, is it work-related stress and burnout, or is it something this person's naturally kind of navigating through life, which is quite common. You then link it back to kind of disengagement, which is high in teams. So it's kind of where's the start and where's the end. For me, there's no simple fix, because when it comes to kind of, if it's not work related, anxiety, of which I've felt in my life, I've felt low mood, I've struggled, I've felt stressed loads of times. Unfortunately, a lot of the work needs to come from the individual. So it's giving them the tools if appropriate. And I think that's when we spoke about, you know, and we kind of had a laugh about them just sending them on that 2-day thing. I think it is appropriate to have some input on life skills. A really simple one I do is just kind of doing a battery check of yourself. You know, mark out of 5, how much water you drink, how much movement do you get, what's your support network like, little things, and giving people the thought to go away and think, I'm falling down here, or sleep. All the basic things. It's really important to give people kind of the knowledge and the tools to self-govern is something I use a lot. You know, it's important we're doing it ourselves. Some will, some won't. I know there's a problem with retention. There's probably huge problems with sickness that people are finding. We can only do what we can do. And it's a tricky one for teams, depending on the side of the company. If it's a medium to small company, you've got more of that intimacy, I feel, where you can have that. My door's open. Again, it comes down to communication. My door's open. If you need anything, give me a shout. If you're struggling, go and have an hour. And just having that kind of setting the scene. But for me to sit here and say, this is how I would solve the anxiety crisis, it's a tricky one, because I think it's very much individual on how you do it, but certainly giving people the tools to maybe navigate things, what they focus on. So for an example, things I use with one-to-one clients, the reason I get stressed when I start focusing on things that aren't in my control. So little basic things like that, where you're putting your energy. Is it on the what ifs in a couple of weeks' time that's causing you stress? What can you do today? What's within your control? What's not? Who can you talk to? And really simplifying it. Again, like I've said, the workshops I do, I want to make it practical. Because I want someone to go away and think, I can do that. And I can do it tomorrow, actually.
Yeah.
And it might feel better in a month. So, yeah. Whether I've answered your question or not, it's a tricky one. But there's so much we can do, but there's no quick fix.
No. Yeah, I think as well, you know, a lot of people don't acknowledge in the short term that potentially they're feeling anxiety or that they are stressed until it sort of gets to a point where they know that there's something potentially not quite right or they're not feeling as well as they normally feel physically, mentally, and then there's still a stigma and a level of embarrassment attached to, hang on a minute, if I tell my line manager that I'm not particularly feeling myself today, what's the consequences of that going to be on me personally? Are they going to treat me differently? Are they going to look at me differently? You know, and so sometimes I think people leave it far too late to actually start to tackle, by which time that, you know, things are become a lot more severe in some cases, not in all. What would your advice be to somebody who potentially isn't feeling great but doesn't know how to A, acknowledge it, but B, then sort of tackle that with their employer?
Well, again, maybe the first part is a little bit of an input and making sure what are the signs to look out for. You know, a little bit of fatigue, not feeling great, a little bit of low mood. That's the time when we want to be noticing it, not when we kind of probably behave in a way that doesn't befit us. Maybe I can remember in the police when I got really stressed, and I can remember finishing a call and banging the phone down. The person on the phone had done nothing wrong. I was just stressed, and I'd let it get to a point where it was affecting me as a person, and that was the point where I went, whoa, right, what's happening? So conversation, again, communication. How can we build that environment where it's seen as okay? I always think with leaders as well, because I talk a lot. Have you heard of that Patrick Lencioni Pyramid of Trust? A
little, yeah.
So obviously I'm not going to go through the whole pyramid now, but it's built on that layer of trust. How do we get trust? What's happening when you're in a trusting relationship? So I'm sure anyone listening to this can think about what's the most trusting relationship I've been in versus the least trust. What's happening within that relationship? You're probably willing to be vulnerable. So how can we create that in the environment? How can we create it genuinely and compassionately? And again, that takes time. But one thing I have found is when leaders lead with vulnerability themselves and they're open themselves, people tend to follow. I remember the first time I went on social media, setting up kind of a conversation around my own internal fragility from when I finished football and how much I struggled, how many men started dipping their hand up. You'd never have known, and people don't know. So making it normal, normalising it is probably the best thing I could do.
Absolutely. I think as well, from an employer perspective, you know, as a business owner, we do carry a lot of stress. You know, we're always switched on. We're always sort of, you know, answering emails on, you know, putting this sometimes unnecessary excess pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to spin all the plates, to be, you know, the accountant, the marketing person, the HR person, and all of the sort of the hats that come with being a business owner. What would you say to a business owner who was potentially struggling and potentially needed that help?
It depends on the scale of it. What I would say, never be afraid to ask for help. I'm a big advocate of that. Always have your own support network, because it'd be quite lonely at the top. You're there being strong for everyone else. I don't know about you, I've got a huge perfectionist in me. So although I've realised that I might talk the talk a lot on camera, sometimes I'm still reluctant to ask for help. And I, even recently, have had to kind of, what do I always say, turn the mirror back on you. Don't be asking other people to do things that you wouldn't be prepared to do. So get your own support network. Speaking to people, you'd be amazed at the dual benefits of that. I've done it recently, walking with a mate, where I shared a few things and he went, I've been feeling the same, and we had a chat. So not going to go down the line of, you know, it's good to talk and all this thing, but it is. It really is. We said probably earlier on in the podcast about how important communication is, connection, to walk out and going, oh, it was really good to see you. That. So don't bottle it up. However it looks to you. And again, we're talking about huge topics that I am unable to kind of navigate into one work environment, but we're talking about human beings. So on a very human level, it's lonely at the top. It's lonely doing everything yourself. So lead by example and speak out, and even just getting it out verbally sometimes is that decompression's huge.
I think as well, you know, we as business owners, well, as any individual, you know, you're looking on social media thinking, oh, well, everyone's doing so much better than I am. Everyone else is, you know, growing. Everyone else has got the new car or the new house or has got 5 new customers this week or whatever. And it's sort of, they're living in this highlight reel of everyone else is doing so much better than what I'm doing. And that sort of, you then inadvertently put further more pressure on yourself to, oh, I've got to be better. I've got to do this. I've got to do, and you sort of almost become competitive with these people that you're reading or seeing stuff about.
One quote that resonates with that for me, and I read it a few years ago, and I think, I don't know if it was a psychiatrist, and it said, be wary of comparing your internal reality to someone's external fantasy. And it was kind of like, you know, how many, like back in the day, for example, and this is probably going to seem a bit off tangent example, so bear with me. My first lad's holiday in Magaluf 98, no smartphones, no nothing. You had a Kodak camera and you rewound. You had it took, you either looked horrific or you didn't, and you were all right with it. What happens now? You take 55 pictures at varying angles, at varying filters, and that's what you post. So always be wary of that comparison. Compare and despair, as they say.
Absolutely.
So kind of stick in your own lane and stick in your own reality and work on you. And if you are feeling a bit poor inside, and this goes for everyone I work with from a one-to-one perspective, and I always say this, never mind work, never mind business, you're the most important project you'll ever work on. If you're not right, you can't run a business. You can't perform effectively. So always start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Super. Okay, so going back to sort of leadership and development for small businesses, sort of many managers become like accidental leaders. What would you say to those people who have sort of found themselves in a leadership role but maybe haven't perhaps got the skill set or the experience and have sort of wound up there and are experiencing challenges and don't really know what to do with it?
There's a couple of things, and again, there's no individual kind of way of answering this, but if I could use a couple of my recent experiences where that has been the case. And firstly, there was an example of someone who set up their own business. Could be you on your own, and then suddenly you're employing a lot of people, and before you, actually I'm a leader. And that's first point. I'm going to reference DISC. Back in the day, the Red D style was seen as the go-to authority figure. That was your old school bosses. Get it done by the end of the day. No worries, boss. And it was all that type of thing. Now I want to make it clear, anyone can lead in the way you are, but again, you need to understand who you are. If you have to act or perceive like you need to act in a certain way, there's no longevity in that, and you will get burnt out. So a lot of the problems I'm seeing is people not understanding the place, and an even bigger one was being frightened to upset people, and that created so many problems in each of the companies I've worked with. Weighing up the kind of pros and cons between potentially upsetting that person and the impact moving forward. So that is one of the key things that I found. Firstly, people not understanding that they can lead as themselves. Be proud of yourself, understand yourself. You don't have to be a shouter. You can be an effective communicator and be quite quiet and reserved. So lead as you. And secondly, you can't be neglecting conversations that need to be had. That's the thing that stood out for me. Yeah.
I think as well there's a significant difference between being a leader and being an effective manager. I know from my own experience, I'm a great leader, and I really enjoy leading and the vision and, you know, where we're going and how you can be part of this. Management, however, you know, the day-to-day, sitting down, doing those one-to-ones, doing that sort of day-to-day KPI tracking and all of the management that comes with having a team is not something I particularly enjoy. So I've sort of always stuck to my skills. You know, I focus on the leadership and what I call the fun bit, you know, and then I bring other people in who are professionals at what they do and are much better managers, much more C focused in terms of the DISC profiling. You know, they're good at the facts and the figures and studying sort of like those KPIs and that more, I don't want to call it micromanagement because it isn't, but it's sort of having that person that can have those routines and that consistency that a lot of employees do need, and they thrive actually by having that consistency. And the difference between leadership and management is different.
Well, the way I've done it with some teams is kind of you manage task, you lead behaviour.
Yeah.
So don't underplay what you do, because you still lead and you still do all that behaviours, and you do manage things. So setting it up so it's differentiating how much of your time is spent in the management circle versus leadership. You seem to have enough wherewithal to think, well, I don't actually like that bit, so I'm going to get someone in, which is great. Because one thing I would say, and this actually links your last kind of two questions together really nicely, is going back to the first one about people who become, you know, unexpected leaders, is an inability to delegate. I've got to do it all myself, 'cause I've got to prove myself.
Yeah.
I've got to go and, you know, take the cleaning company, for example, that you're running, and someone who might become a manager and think they've got to go and do 8 hours cleaning still to prove their worth. It's like, well, no, that's your job now.
Yeah.
Get used to it and work with that. So again, that self need to kind of be a perfectionist, to prove yourself, to prove your worth, that shows up a lot as well, which kind of links it together nicely.
Yeah, I think delegating is probably one of the most common challenges business owners specifically do have, because they start, I know I myself, you know, I was everything when I started my company. You know, I was the service deliverer, I was the marketer, the HR, the accountant, as we've said before, all the hats. And it becomes, when you've done it on your own for such an extended period of time, and you know the way you like things to be done, it's really difficult to
relinquish.
Delegate.
Will we not do it as well as you, Hayley? Is that the problem? That's the difference, and that's when we're talking about developing people, because it's so tricky. I can either show this new person who might have really good potential how to do it. They might not do it quite as good as me. They might make a few mistakes, but in 3-4 months' time, I forgot about that because they're doing it.
Absolutely.
Or no, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'll do it quicker.
Yeah, and I think
it's a tricky one.
Yeah, you'll end up burnt out very quickly by doing it all yourself. And you know, also, a lot of the time I see this with particularly small businesses. You know, they've been on their own for a long time. They've brought somebody in to help them with tasks in their business when they're already at maximum capacity.
Yeah.
So they then don't necessarily have the time or the energy to sort of support and train and nurture that individual to do it the way they want it to be done. And they get frustrated very quickly, but actually if they just spent a little bit more time or got somebody in slightly earlier before they were at maximum capacity, their delivery, their support and their training may have been more productive.
Well, you know what happens with that, you've actually set me up, so thank you for this. Something I've done with kind of leadership development workshop that I put together is the difference between delegation and abdication.
Okay.
And I always ask the question, who here delegates effectively? And they put their hands up and they say, how many of you have delegated something and it's come back to you and you've had to end up doing it? Majority of hands go up. I've said, that's because you abdicated it. That's because you had a list of 10 things and one of them was burning hell, and you just think, I need to get rid of something. Here, do that for me. That's not delegation. So there's a thread, and I think it was kind of, was it a monkey or something? It was kind of, name the monkey, name what the problem is that you're solving, assign it, so assign it appropriately, not just the nearest person, like a rugby ball, assign it appropriately. Who fits this bill? Who would be able to do this? Check in. So you've agreed an endpoint when he's going to have it done by. You then check in. So you're kind of supporting the process, but you're setting people up for success. It's not just get this done. So being really clear on whether we are delegating or whether we're abdicating, because it's kind of the cup's overflowing and we need to get rid of something.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that then, a lot of businesses think they're being really productive, but actually they're on that verge of burnout, or sometimes they're already at that sort of burnout point. What would you say to a business owner who thinks, I'll just put in more hours and I'll just work longer days or such as that? So
the way I'll answer this is what I would say to one-to-one clients rather than a business aspect, because I can testify to this as a sole trader, someone who has got bogged down. The best decision I ever made was doing less and stepping back. However that looks for you, doing more never works when you're in stress, when you're in fight or flight, when you're in what ifs, what if that happens, this is going to happen, catastrophizing, the weight on your shoulders. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back the other way. That is the best advice I can give. Not always achievable when you're juggling and spinning plates, but to some degree it is, because how can you think and make effective decisions when you're fighting and you're in the middle of that kind of cyclone and you don't know what's up and down and you think you're working hard and you are working hard, but you're not working effectively. So the best advice I could say, however that looks, give yourself space. Someone said to me recently, and it's true, kind of space is the best medicine you can give yourself. just whatever you need to do and it might just be walk outside and look up into the sky for a bit and have a deep breath, or it might be parking it for the day and having a good kip.
Yeah.
I can't make that decision for you, but taking that step back usually is the right approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, you know, it's the sort of the old adage of, you know, a watched pot never boils, and you know, sometimes you can be so focused on something, you know, that actually you need to take that step back and have a different perspective for a period of time, and then the idea will pop into your head while you're doing something rather mundane usually.
But what I'd say to that is from the work I do with people and individuals and kind of self-development is likely the focus of that perceived problem that's burning a hole in your head comes down to how you're feeling in yourself anyway. So by taking that step back, actually that's a symptom, but it's maybe a lack of confidence in me that's the issue here. So what do I need to do? So it allows you to kind of realign a little bit.
Yeah, and also it's important to sort of stop before something stops you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we've all done it where we've gone and gone and gone until our body's shut down because we're physically and mentally exhausted. And, you know, I've done it myself many times, and you'd think I'd have learnt this over the 18 years I've been in business, but I do still have periods of time
Still get the odd little reminder.
Yes, where your body just decides, actually, no, I've had enough now, and it shuts down, and, you know, you pick up a cold or you
But then that links back to your question earlier about recognising the signs and the importance of it. It's like the sign before you got the cold was probably a week or two before that.
Absolutely,
you know, and it's kind of like...
But as business owners, we just keep pushing on, don't we? And it's not always a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, okay. So overcoming fear then in business. So a lot of business owners have, you know, a real sort of underlying fear of failure, a fear of sort of pushing themselves out of the comfort zone, for potentially worry that it might not go the way they hope it would. What would you say to somebody who is potentially feeling fear of making a decision or doing something around their business?
Make a decision, move forward, do it badly. I'm not going to end the question there, but that's my best idea, because I'm actually, it's funny when I have these conversations because I end up speaking to myself and I walk out motivated because I'm talking to myself here. I'll put things off, perfectionist, what if it doesn't go right? Let's imagine you walk into a room and there's 3 doors and one of them's going to be the perfect thing for you, and you stand there looking at which door. If you just go in and boot one door down, it's not for you. What are you down to? 2 doors. Yeah. And it's how we approach. So the biggest thing I would say there, linking it to confidence. What did I say? You can only get confidence by taking action. There's going to be fear there. It's important to us. But not letting the fear of what ifs get in the way of us doing it. And changing your relationship with failure, I would say, is the single most important thing we can all do. What if we need to fail to do it?
Yeah.
What if we need to fail? The best chef in the world, did he just walk into that restaurant and cook? No. He made mistakes thousands and thousands of times. And again, it linked back to the social media aspect, the perfectionism. We make mistakes all day, every day, so change our relationships with them. Quick example, Thomas Edison created the light bulb. He said, I didn't create the light bulb, I learned how not to do it a couple hundred times. And then one I heard recently, which I loved, this bloke looked at the stats of doing something, and I can't recall what he did, and he said, on average, you have a success every 24 attempts. So he said, every time I got it wrong, I was like, I'm one step closer. And he said, once I got to 21, I was actively giddy because I knew I was close to getting it. But what an amazing, that kind of made me smile, because it was like, what an amazing reframe on failure. Gotta fail.
Yeah.
So what I would say, do it.
Yeah.
Do it with caution when we're running businesses. Clearly think it through, but do it.
Yeah.
Nothing's permanent. Continuous improvement cycle. You know, plan, check, plan, do, check, anchor. What's working, what's not, start again. Yeah. Just keep taking action.
Yeah, because otherwise, you know, it can really sort of hold you back in terms
Hugely.
of, you know, what you're doing, and like you say, the fear of making that decision is a missed opportunity, like you've already said.
Yeah.
And a lot of, you know, even successful business owners, you know, have had a couple of failures before they've actually reached the success.
I'd say all and multiple.
Yeah.
And times it by 3, whatever they say they've been through. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think as well, it's, you know, it's part of the journey, as much as cheesy as it sounds. You know, everybody's business owner has been on a journey, and there may only be small elements of failure within that journey, but ultimately it's how you build that resilience and how you build that confidence over time. You know, confidence.
Absolutely.
Happen, like
yeah, it's looking back. We're always going up this hill and we're always wanting that next challenge. But how often do we stop and look back and go, oh shit, I've done really well.
Yeah.
We don't.
No.
We don't, and we need to.
Yeah, I think as well, it's about remembering to celebrate even the little things that happen.
Little things are the big things.
Absolutely, yeah. They build up, and I think
Absolutely
if you're always looking for the big celebration, you'd never achieve it.
No.
And you wouldn't be celebrating all.
No.
Yeah.
Just differentiate you. One thing I would say, without getting too kind of into the personal aspect, even though I think it's so important, one thing I say to my one-to-one clients: start with you. Don't start with the task or your performance or your business, because if you don't like yourself at the bottom of the hill, you're not going to like yourself at the top. That's something I always say. If we're looking for that external validation or that external thing that's going to give us something we're lacking, no. Start with you, and kind of the rest will take care of itself, because if you ever met that person that's naturally quite calm and confident and it's quite, I want a bit of that.
Yeah.
I want to feel like that. And that's because they've done the inner work, and the external part takes care of itself.
Yeah, but nobody's calm all the time, right?
Of course
Even
they're not.
The one person that you see and you think, I want to be like them.
Yeah.
They are one of the one person that you always look at and think they've got everything together, and actually they're probably, in reality, they're just the same as you, spinning all the plates and doing everything.
Of course they are.
On the surface, they look a lot calmer.
But it's perspective. Again, what we've said is that didn't go wrong. Am I going to catastrophise and absolutely lose my mind, or I'm going to say, what happened here?
Yeah.
What would I do next time? Because it's evidence. Just as evidence is looking down the hill to see all the good stuff we've always done, getting something wrong is evidence.
Yeah.
How can we use that for a positive?
Yeah, okay, super. So I've had some questions in, so I'm going to ask you these questions now.
Is that not how I thought we were doing?
No, you don't get off that easily. One of the questions we've had in is, how can I improve my communication in a team without having to constantly hold meetings?
Understand yourself first and foremost. Understand how you're showing up. Be consistent with your communication. I don't just want to repeat things I've said, but that's pretty much it. Know who you are. Know what you're currently doing. And again, know how you'd like things to be. I would like to have a nice, engaging team. Right, what does that look like? So again, start with the end in mind. Stephen Covey book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Start with the end in mind. And then, first things first, what do I do? So treat it, and one thing I would always say, I'm very relational people side. I'm the opposite side of the disc to you. So you'd probably make a good business team. Like, you crack on with that. I'll try and make people smile and stuff. But kind of, I've lost my thought when I was saying that. Remind me what I was saying.
Why not? Without constantly having to have meetings, how can we effectively communicate without having lots of meetings? Yeah,
again, just things we've spoke about. Firstly, understanding yourself, knowing what you want, that clarity. So think of it as a goal setting thing. That's what I was going to say. So if you are very task orientated and you like achieving things, you can view it as that. How can I achieve that? So what's the first step? And you can monitor it in that way. So there's always a way of making it fit with your personality type in terms of what you do. So yeah, I think meetings are healthy, but one thing I would add to that in terms of the meetings, cut out the fluff. Be clear on what you want to get across. Be clear on the issue.
Needs to be a bit more D.
Exactly. But yeah, get to the point.
I think as well, it depends on the subject matter, right? You know, if you don't need to be, you don't need to have a meeting about every single thing, otherwise you wouldn't do anything else. I think often when I'm sort of trying to communicate to my team, it's around, you know, who do I need to speak to? Does the whole team need to know about this particular thing, or is it just a one-on-one conversation? Which in most cases can be done over the phone or simply sometimes through an email. Then you've got the evidence that you've actually made that request.
Which for a blue C styles, really important. They prefer an email.
Absolutely.
Give me the detail, audit trailable.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it just depends on, you know, I always stop and question, do we need a meeting? Does this require a phone call, or will a text message or an email suffice? And again, looking at that person of, you know, who you're speaking to, you know, you're always going to get the one where you'll send the email, then you'll get a phone call asking you 35 questions about it. So you know what, you know, it's going to be.
But again, this is knowing your team and who's on your team. Hopefully, whether it's DISC or other, and having that understanding, you'll know the best way to make that effective. Whether it's getting everyone on a Zoom call or everyone in an office or an email saying this starts as of today, as blunt as that. Because sometimes that works with some people. So absolutely.
Okay. I've got a good team, but productivity isn't where it should be. What could potentially be causing that?
Clarity. Clarity. People aware of the roles, expectations. Is everyone aware of what they should be doing? Are the KPIs? You know, you've said you enjoy that, you're good at that. Might not be. So if people are good and they're engaged, what's stopping them? Do they need a word? So if it's an individual, sometimes you say this is an individual problem, but if it's a collective that's not working, we kind of probably need to lean towards a little bit more process. What's falling down here?
I think as well, it's a case of what does productivity actually look like?
There you go. And that's the definition and vision piece that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. Sometimes people feel they're not productive, but actually they don't know what good productivity looks like.
I worked with a team when I first started, and I've learned so much, which from the mistakes and the undercharging, I might add, I did in the early days, and all these things. But what I learned from working with this team, I mean, they set targets that were so low because they wanted to be liked, and they still didn't make those targets. So there's so many different ways of being too nice versus being productive for you and your company, but working with them. And again, that word communication, dialogue, clarity, people respond to that however you do it.
Absolutely. Okay, what's the best way to handle different personalities within one team?
Understand, again. Seek first to understand. Turn the mirror on you. Who am I? What do I bring? Because I might walk in the office thinking, everyone loves me. Everyone loves me. I'm funny. Who wouldn't like me? I'm charming. And it's all that. And, you know, you're driving some people insane. So firstly, have that little bit of self-awareness and then understand others. And one thing I always say, even at the end of disc days, I like, if in doubt, what can we do? And they go, ask. And go, yeah. And that's something a lot of leaders maybe forget. If you don't know, what's the harm in saying, can I do anything to help you? You know, get a positive outcome in. They might go, no, that's fine, no, I'm good. Or they might say, actually you could. So again, it's that conversation piece that I think's really important.
Yeah, okay. How do I build confidence in staff who doubt themselves even when they're really good at their job?
Praise, but not praise for praise sake. I mean, some people, again, without referencing DISC and all the different parts, some people don't need it. You know, you could say to a task-orientated style, D style, C style, well done. They say, you don't need to tell me that, I know I'm good at it. That thing. But the needy side, where I live, you know, I might need a little belly tickle every so often, and just to say, you did a really good job there. A bit of sincerity, a bit of appreciation. So praise, because without going off onto a totally different subject, you know, we're quick to talk when there's a problem. How often are we praising people? But genuine praise.
Yeah.
And how can we make this regular? Not every 3 months on a review. Just, you did a really good job there, thank you.
Yeah.
Done. The little things are the big things. So yeah, how can we incorporate a little bit of praise?
Okay, that's good to know. What can I do if a high performing employee is negatively affecting my team's morale?
Deal with swiftly without giving a scenario on how that might look. Mentioned bad apples earlier in the podcast. You know, you've got to weigh up, because I've seen this happen before. They're bringing in far too much money. We've got to leave them alone. But what's the risk? So it needs dealing appropriately. Without a specific scenario, I can't really advise. But if it got to the point where it was going to kind of ruin the whole culture of a company, they've got to go. However, hopefully a conversation could be had, an effective communication, which got us into a place where it could be navigated appropriately. I would say the worst thing that could be done is not dealing with the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got quite high turnover. How can I reduce my staff turnover without increasing salaries?
Make people part of the vision. Give people a voice. Listen to them. Might be more difficult for huge companies, but I'm thinking in my mind about those medium-sized teams. I don't think it takes too much to genuinely, they might come up with an idea that's absolutely blinding. And again, it's that kind of continuous improvement model. Oh, we're going to trial this for 3 months. Right. We have a meeting every 9 o'clock. It's only going to be half an hour. We're going to talk about what we're going to do this week. And a really simple, is that working? Yes or no? What would we change? So changing the mentality. So yeah, absolutely engage people. Give them a voice. If they're part of what you're doing, you're going to try harder. And if you're making money, you're going to feel good about yourself. So that culture of less, get that done because it's your job, more how could we do this better?
Yeah.
Get people involved.
Okay. I've promoted somebody into a management role, but they're really struggling. How can I support them?
Firstly, have a conversation. Sit them down, let's have a quick chat. Similar to what we said about people that's maybe unexpectedly got into those roles, the similar things are probably going to apply here. You've given people probably because you deem their performance and credibility good enough for that. They may not be suited to it. They may be struggling. There may be a lack of clarity on expectation. They may just be absolutely anxious and scared of making mistakes. They may be in a new role where they're scared of upsetting people. You know, all these things we spoke about. But at the minute we're speculating, and unfortunately, the longer it takes us to deal with something, the more we do speculate, and we end up filling in the blanks. best advice, ask him.
Yeah.
How are you doing? What problems are you finding? Could I do anything to assist?
Yeah.
That, you know, we deal with facts, then not kind of things that we're surmising.
Yeah, I think as well, sometimes if you've found yourself in a role that you don't feel potentially equipped for, that sort of imposter syndrome comes
Massively.
in of, hang on a minute, how have I ended up here?
Yeah.
And what am I doing?
Yeah. So do we need to support someone because in time they'll be brilliant at that role, or is it just not cut out for that because the personality doesn't fit? There's only one way to find out. Have those conversations and trust your judgment too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what are the signs that my team is stressed out or close to burnout, and what should I be doing about it?
Well, probably no one's turned up. No one's turned up for work. No, that's the kind of extreme version. But again, it's very hard for me to define the simple signs of maybe people going quiet. There's maybe a bit of conflict happening. It could be anything. So it'd be unfair of me to kind of just describe what could be happening. You know, as a human being, when you're not feeling quite right, how do you behave? Look out for those signs. Some people will become more aggressive, i.e. me slamming the phone down. Not really my personality, but when I become defensive and a little bit trapped and I don't know what to do, that was my reaction. So watching out for that. Again, hopefully not boring people to death. It comes down to setting that scene of giving people the opportunity to talk and express things. That isn't just to moan. One thing I always say is get conversations happening in the room and make sure it's forward focused. You're allowed to mention what's not working, but I want you to tell me how you think we could improve it.
Yeah.
So it's changing that mindset. One of the teams I worked with recently where we went down and we did, have you heard of the Tuckman model?
I haven't, no.
So if you look into that, I think it's forming, storming, norming and performing. And it splits it into kind of 4 areas. So to get people into that performing stage, you need that continuous improvement. You need that. This is working, yeah, great. How can we improve it? You can function really well in the norming stage, a lot of businesses do. This is just the way we've always done things. You'll hear that a lot. Everyone's happy enough here. Probably not though. So let's make that and let's get him performing. So look into that Tuckman model. It's a really simple but effective model to look at.
Okay, we'll have to look into that. Okay, last question. How do I overcome my own hesitation about difficult conversations with staff?
Firstly, you need to, but secondly, being a bit more compassionate with that is looking at what happens if you don't. So again, just reference something that you or anyone else might want to look into, and I think her name's Jill Scott, and she did a TED talk and she created something. If you're not happy with a whining American voice, be careful listening to it because it does go through, but the concept's brilliant. And she does something called radical candor. Candor, I think the American word for honesty, and it's about being honest. So without going through the whole model, because I use it in some of my team days, think of it as 2 axes. The first axis going up is care personally. Care about the person you're going to have that conversation with. But the other axis is the more important one going across, challenge directly. Deal with the problem. Don't fluff it up. Don't put it off. And if we can get an environment where we're not waiting for a 3-month review, it's lifetime. We're going to have a chat about this. What would we do? And getting used to having those conversations. Don't put them off because the rest will kind of rot from within if we're just allowing things to happen. And that kind of links in with what you said about the high performing team member that's probably a little bit causing a little bit of disruption. Again, care personally, challenge directly. That's the way I'd approach it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining me today. So that is all we've got time for on today's video podcast, Business Made Simple with Hayley Kosolu. If you are struggling with anything team related or even personally want to discover a little bit more about yourself, feel free to reach out to Steve with The Curious Northerner, who I'm sure will be happy to answer any questions, and links for his contact information will be attached in the comments below.